resume today, you will see titles like Dual Qualified Red Seal Technician and VW Master Technician. It looks clean, it looks linear. But if you trace the actual path under those titles, you will find you won't find a smooth highway. You will find a road paved with sweat, grit, and a lot of moments where people thought I was completely out of my mind. My journey started back in 2003 when I stepped into the motor industry as an apprentice auto electrician. Now, normally apprenticeship doesn't take 8 years, but it took me until 2010 to actually qualify. Those 8 years were the most difficult, uncertain times of my professional life. Everything was unknown. And I quickly learned a hard truth about the corporate world. Many companies don't want students, they want cheap labor. Even though I was doing the work of a qualified auto electrician, my salary stayed firmly locked in the apprentice bracket. It was a massive benefit for companies, bottom line, but a heavy burden for me. But I stuck it out. Why? Because I realized a fundamental rule of our industry. With that red seal, it doesn't matter if you are the best technician in the workshop. Without that piece of paper, companies will only ever see you as a worker, never as a professional. In 2010, I finally got my first red seal. And just like I hoped, the doors began to open. Armed with my qualification, I landed an opportunity with Volkswagen as a diagnostic technician. This was an incredible, exciting chapter. Suddenly, I wasn't just fixing problems, I was solving mysteries. VW flooded me with world-class training, teaching me how to diagnose vehicles with true professional precision. The sheer volume of knowledge I absorbed during this time was mind-blowing. I felt like I had arrived. But the thing about thirst for knowledge is that once you get a taste of it, you just want more. I looked up and I saw the absolute peak of the technical mountain at VW, the master technician status. That became my next target. However, as I began working towards that level, I noticed a massive shift happening right under my feet. The automotive world was changing. The old days of separating the sparky from the grease monkey were dying. I realized that mechanical and electrical engineering were merging into a single complex organism. Think about vehicles on the road today. You cannot buy a foreign car if you only understand and you can't diagnose it if you only understand gears. You must understand how they breathe together. You need both. So I made a decision, and looking back, I can understand why the people around me thought I lost my mind. While I was right in the middle of pushing for my VW Master Tech status, I decided to qualify as a mechanic from scratch. Imagine the reality of that. By day, I was carrying the heavy responsibility of a specialized VW diagnostic technician, but on paper and in practice, I voluntarily put the apprentice overall back on for mechanical side. I was living a double life. During the day, I ran a complex diagnostics. At night, I buried my head in college textbooks to master the mechanical theory part-time. It was exhausting. There were days of absolute sweat and tears. It meant putting my ego aside completely. You know, to go from being expert in the room to the guy asking basic mechanical questions, a test of character. But I knew the horizon I was aiming for. In 2018, the sacrifice paid off. The dust settled, and I stood there with two massive milestones achieved simultaneously. I was officially a VW Master Technician, and I held my second red seal as a qualified mechanic. I remember sitting back in 2018 thinking, finally I'm done. I climbed the mountain. But technology doesn't care about our comfort zone. Today I'm not sitting back resting. If you look at my workbench right now, you will see I'm deeply immersed in the world of electric vehicles. The game is changing yet again. The voltages are higher, the software is deeper, and the engineering is entirely new. And that brings me to the core truth of the career path I'm presenting to you today. My career isn't defined by a specific tool, a specific garage, even a specific brand. My career path is defined by adaptability. It's a testament of the fact that this is a never-ending trade. The moment you think you know everything is the exact moment you become absolute. 23 years ago, I was an underpaid apprentice trapped in the unknown. Today, I'm still a student, but by choice. I'm still learning, still pushing, and ready for whatever technology rolls out into the bay next. Thank you so much. Is there any questions?
I just want to give you guys a bit of background of myself being in the motor industry. So I've been in the industry for about 20 years now, or I think well over 20 years. But just to share a bit about my pathway and to offer some advice on how someone can become a high voltage technician. So we know that the electric vehicles are the future of the automotive industry. And I just have a bit of a presentation that I want to share with you guys. And you can feel free to stop me at any time in this presentation and ask any questions if you wish. Just busy presenting this file. Okay, and once again, my name is Sadish Ramal. I'm an electric vehicle facilitator and trainer at ChrisnelSA. Just have a technical issue here. Okay, so we'll begin. Yeah, once again, I'm an electric vehicle technician and assessor at ChrisnelSA. And before we begin, we'll just discuss a bit on the South African motor industry and the market trends at the moment. So at this stage, we know that electric vehicles are entering our market, but it's projected that by 2030, the electric vehicle will make up about 30% of road vehicles. And this is not just limited to passenger vehicles. We have commercial vehicles as well, buses, and we're going to see an influx in two-wheelers. One of the ways one can enter the automotive industry and enter the electric vehicle field is through the Masita apprenticeship program, which is a program that I entered into about 18 years ago. And this program offers training at different levels. Of course, it begins at school level where maths and science is extremely important. And it has about 4 levels that a person would have to go through in the apprenticeship program to eventually qualify as a technician. Begin with the level 1 training, and soon after you would complete into your level 2. Level 2 would then lead to a more advanced level 3 qualification. However, with this program, you'd find that the qualifications are, or you can only reach your final qualification at the end of the program. Again, this all begins at school level. You'll identify some of our subjects here. This begins at school level once again, and it's important to take on your maths and science subjects. This program to respond. So yes, once again, this goes back to your school level, and you'll identify some of the principles here on electromotive theory, industrial electronics, and these are your technical subjects which eventually will lead to you entering the automotive field. And I began as an assistant actually before starting off as apprentice, and got to meet some really nice and interesting people along the way whom I learned a lot from. And one of the opportunities I had was to work for BMW in the Middle East. This is actually Abu Dhabi Motors, and it happens to be the largest BMW dealership in the world, controlled directly by BMW in Munich. So this was quite an achievement because it also allowed me to work on some of the most exclusive BMW and Rolls-Royce vehicles in the world. And it's always been a passion for me to work on high-performance vehicles like these. And once again, I began my training over there. So your training in the automotive industry never really ends. I began my training and started off as a level 1 BMW technician there. Prior to this, I worked at Mercedes-Benz in South Africa. Going through the different levels, I eventually reached the master level and qualified as a BMW Group master technician. At this time, electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles weren't that popular on the roads, and there wasn't really a qualification structure on high voltage technicians. However, there was a lot of training since BMW, being a brand that is always ahead of technology, already had quite a few electric vehicles on the market and hybrid electric vehicles. So this is where I began my high voltage expert training, but it still goes back to our school level. So going back to our school level, you'll immediately identify some basic symbols in electronics here. And just for your information, this is taken directly from the BMW training manuals, just to show how electronics begins at school levels, but continues into industry, into more advanced levels with more advanced applications, more advanced tooling and measuring devices. And throughout my career, I often found myself going back to my notes at college level, where I studied electronics, industrial electronics and electrical engineering, as well as mechanical engineering. And these were things I could apply, these theories and principles which I learned at school and college level. I was able to apply it in industry. So this particular brand was really exciting for me because it allowed me to really test my abilities, to really work on very high precision vehicles, or vehicles that required a high level of calibration. And the testing and repair functions were very, and still are very advanced on this particular brand of vehicle. So around this time, BMW launched the hybrid vehicles. Hybrid vehicles, we know, have been in existence for a long time, but they really reached production scale around 2016, where, and I was fortunate enough because I got first-hand experience working on these vehicles. And of course, this now led to the need for high voltage experts in the industry. So for some time, we didn't really have a new technical role in the industry until now, where the hybrid vehicle was launched, and it took us back to the drawing board. And